All right, hi guys. Sorry for the delay. It's exam week, which means I'm, kind of unfortunately having to deal with a lot of makeup, so the recording's gonna be spotty. But I wanted to try to get another video out so that way we'd be on pace with my other class. What we're gonna do today, and this one's gonna be very brief because unfortunately I, don't have a lot of time to record, but I do want to at least get you guys something. What we're gonna do today is talk about the United States fighting the First World War. And if you notice at the date here on the title slide, 1917 to 1920. Okay. World War One ends in 1918, and we'll deal with the peace, we'll deal with Treaty of Versailles, stuff like that in the next lecture. But for this one, what will happen is after the war, we're actually going to fight the Soviets during the Russian Civil War. We're going to fight the Reds. And so for the United States, our war experience does not end in 1918. And indeed, for the majority of the Allied powers, it doesn't. We're not going to be able to talk about every battle, but I do want to at least hit some highlights of the American participation in the First World War. We're going to talk about some things going on at home. We're going to talk about the buildup of the army. We're going to talk about two of the battles the United States fights, and then we're going to talk about the cost of the war as a whole. So the most immediate impact of, the declaration of war on April the 6th, 1917 is that there's an immediate backlash against German, people of German descent here in the United States. What we're going to see is it becomes unfashionable to have a German-sounding name. It becomes, hang on, apparently something on my computer is just like randomly going to update. So how about no? Okay, thank you HP for just randomly updating while I'm doing a video. Sorry about that. So what we're going to see, and I don't even know, hang on, just okay. I'm getting a slight delay. I can see that even on my end, so hopefully it's not terrible for you guys, but again, I want to at least get you something. What we're going to see is it became, taboo to have any connection with Germany whatsoever. I mean, if you had a German-sounding name, you could be beaten up. The government would encourage stuff like with this: danger to pro-Germans, loyal Americans, welcome to Edison Park. The idea you could beat up people that were German. You could, shops are going to be vandalized. We're going to have things like Sauerkraut will be renamed Liberty Cabbage, or Hamburger will become Liberty Sandwiches. It's the purging of German culture from American society. Last names are going to be changed, en masse. Guys like Eddie Rickenbacker, the top-scoring American fighter pilot of the First World War. His original name is Eddie Reichenbacher. Well, that's not going to really do so well at publicity, so he changes it. We're going to see in schools, German was generally the primary language that would be taught, the primary secondary language. Today it's Spanish generally, but, early 1910s it's German. But we don't want to teach German because, German is the language of the enemy. So what we're going to see is all of this German discrimination. And it's going to be reinforced by movies, by propaganda, by posters, by the government, by things like that. Effectively purges German culture from the United States. If we look, historically, the Germans have been here since the founding. Think the Pennsylvania Dutch, who were, German-speaking farmers that had come in and, still had German-speaking enclaves well into the 19th century. Or places like New Braunfels in Texas, which, they would at this time still be predominantly speaking German because it's a German community. But World War I just whips everybody up into such a frenzy that the culture is generally purged from American society. And it's done in part thanks to propaganda. As I just realized that I'm using this image twice. Oh well. With propaganda, it's fueled by the government. You're going to have movies, posters, books. People are going to give speeches. Bear in mind, Thomas Edison, we have the movie camera now. So now it's a thing where you see this. It looks real. It seems real. There's no Snopes, there's no Facebook, there's no way to fact check, but it's enough to get people, I'm going to use an old person saying, but in a tizzy. I don't know why that just popped into my head, but, people are just going to be, incensed by this. And if we look, there's various reasons for this propaganda. Some of it, okay, is just to try to create a sense of belonging. So I have to ask any of you, and the joke's spoiled if you've already printed out, if you printed out the slides, but if you're watching this, maybe it's not. Are there any, I'm sure many of you are dog owners. Are there any of you that like Dachshunds or German Shepherds? Because if so, you are traitors to the government. You're going to have things like this. I like dogs, but not this breed. It became passé to like Dachshunds. Now, here's what my question was. Do they actually make little, Ritterkreuzes and, pickle hubs for dogs? Because that would be like the best freaking Halloween costume for a dog ever. I'm just saying. I want to see this dog. I will take this dog out of this guy's hands and I will, that's perfectly fine. But stuff like this, it's to promote that sense of identity. I mean, dogs aren't going to contribute to the war effort at all. Neither will sauerkraut, neither will eating a burger. I mean, heart disease, yeah, but contribute to the war, no. But it's designed to create a sense of community. That Americans do this, Germans do this. This is how we can tell we are apart. Others will try to get you to either enlist or to buy stuff. Stuff like this. Destroy this mad brute. Enlist today. Well, if you remember my, ankle striptease from several lectures ago, okay, if it's taboo. Now, we're out of the Victorian era. We're into what would be called the Edwardian era. But it became taboo. It's still taboo for women to show off, naughty bits. I mean, you're supposed to wear about 20,000 million layers of clothing. I mean, just go watch an episode of Downton Abbey. Well, if you look here, the woman is baring her breasts. So, I mean, it's evocative. It's rape imagery. The idea is, look, this, the German brute, the German gorilla has disrobed this woman, and you need to enlist to try to stop it. So I got a funny story. In my 130-person section, I tried to ask clues about this, and nobody wanted to hint on that. And so it reminded me of a story that's actually from the 20s. And consider this the next time you decide to go buy fried chicken. When you order chicken, what do you order? You order white meat or dark meat. Well, that actually comes from the fact that in the 1920s, it's still so taboo to talk about this that people didn't want to order breasts and thighs. It was a way to get around saying breasts and thighs. So just random thing. But it's rape imagery to get you to, join the war, stop this. Or stuff like this, Halt the Hun, where, he has a woman in various stages of undress sheltering a child. And he looks pretty brutish. And I mean, what's he going to do? Again, I'm sighing because in one of my classes, my U.S. since 1865 class, I showed this. And I again asked, trying to get, some student participation. And apparently that was the unfiltered day because this one female student just blurts out as loud as she can, "He's about to bend her over." I have to say, if you want to render Dr. Prince speechless, that's how you do it. It's like, what the hell do I even say to that? But at some level, it's true in the sense that with this rape imagery, okay, what the two things are going to do, the image on the left is trying to tell you, if you are a man, and remember, World War I, men, this is how you proved your manhood. If you're a man, you would enlist and stop this. You would ensure that gorilla, the German, cannot do this. But what if you're unfit for war? Or what if you're a woman? Then the second image tries to get you to buy a Liberty loan. The idea being, if you buy this loan, buy this bond, okay, you're paying for a doughboy to have a rifle. You're paying for a soldier to get a machine gun. It is still you contributing to the war effort. So, this stuff, it's going to play on stereotypes. It's going to play on, gender roles. It's going to play on sexual imagery. But it's all really effective. And this is a post-war one, but this continues the idea of, this is actually a post-war British one, but once a German, always a German. Remember what they do in World War I. Don't give Germans jobs post-war. Don't help Germans. Remember that Germans are radically different. But if we see, a lot of this imagery, okay, this is post-war, but it evinces the imagery that would have been used during the war. The idea of the German soldier bayoneting, a young baby on his rifle. It never happened, but this was a common myth. Or the firing squads of nurses. Okay, one did happen. Or, again, more sexual rape imagery. Or, whoops, wrong. Or the thought of here, okay, they're going to burn everything down. These type of images would have been all over propaganda at the time. And again, you need an outlet for that. And I want you to think back to September 11, 2001. Okay, there were a wave of murders, and I think at least 5 or 10 were confirmed of people killing Muslims just to say, well, I got back for 9/11. Never mind these people had nothing to do with it. Never mind they're American citizens. We killed Muslims just to get back at 9/11. That's the same thing's going to happen here. with no outlet to rapidly go to war and do this, the outlet becomes the German population at home. Everyone from people with German last names, German shops, dachshunds, whatever. When you create this kind of supervillain, there has to be an outlet for it. Now, at the same time, okay, understand World War I is a total war in the sense that all of society must mobilize to fight it. We're talking we need 2 million troops. We need weapons and equipment for that. We need everybody on board. The U.S. railroad system will be nationalized under the United States Railroad Administration, where the government will take over every major private railroad and run them as a single company. To do that, to keep order, we get the Espionage Act of 1917. And what this said is, for the first time, it's now a crime to spy on the American government. It's now a crime to give up trade secrets. But also it goes further and it says sedition is a crime. Turn back the clock. Okay. Actually, reversing it, so I guess that's turning back the clock from, What we're going to see is, remember the Alien and Sedition Acts, way back at the end of the 18th century, okay, when John Adams signs it, and it became, where if somebody criticized the American government, they could be imprisoned. And you've got, Thomas Jefferson advocating nullification because First Amendment, you can say whatever you damn well please. This stuff over here, instead, what this says is, no, if you criticize the government, you can be jailed. We're going to see guys like Eugene V. Debs. He will be jailed because he's a socialist. He criticizes the government. And in fact, this is really going to be targeted at socialists, guys like Debs or people like Kate Richards O'Hare. Because, socialists at the time said, look, this is a rich man's war. What does the average industrial worker of the United States care about if Germany and France want to fight a war? What do they care? So it starts off as a wartime necessity, but it's largely used to attack socialists. Now here's the thing. In 1919, people sued. It goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said this is a constitutional law. It's technically still enforced. The government, if you say bad enough stuff, can jail you. And if you spy or, somehow leak trade secrets, you can be jailed. And we see that today with people like, Bradley or Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden, who, the WikiLeaks scandal, stuff like that. The leaking of the diplomatic cables. If, Bradley Manning was convicted under this law, if Edward Snowden ever returns from Russia, he will be convicted under this law. So understand, with World War I, it's the transition to modernity. The idea that to fight a war, and now wars are so critical that they be won, we are willing to give up our liberty and security in exchange for the hope of victory. That rights don't count as much as the final victory. That, principles don't count as much. All that matters is, can we win the war? Now, that's kind of what we're going to leave for most of the home front. We'll come back with racism here in a bit. But I want to talk before the United States declares war. We actually do have a small group of people over in France fighting. By 1915, some Americans are going to be fighting in foreign armies. A few in the German army, but most in the British or French. And the most famous, for those of you guys doing flyboys for your paper, the most famous will be, the Lafayette Escadrille, also known as the Escadrille Américaine, or the American Squadron. A group of American fighter pilots that, would fly for the French army. They're going to use French-built Newport 17s, what you see here. They're going to have Indian head logos emblazoned as their squadron symbols. And these guys are going to be a major propaganda tool. They're fairly competent. 200 pilots, 57 planes shot down by February 1918. Understand, in World War I, a kill, we talk about kills, you think of the Red Baron, 80 kills, but a kill did not have to be just a plane, it could be a balloon as well. So 57 planes isn't that horrendous, it's not that bad, it's actually fairly good. Now, why I've mentioned is they're part of the American story. Again, they're really famous. Again, see Flyboys, which, guilty pleasure, but I'm sorry. The Newport 17 and the Fokker Dreidecker 1 never fought each other. Okay, the triplane didn't come in until about March or April 1918. The Newport 17 was all but phased out by early to mid 1917. Okay, so yeah, some later, but by then, they would have been flying Spads. I know, nerd moment, deal with it. But why these guys are, so influential is understand it, as I hope you got from the discussion last lecture of the punitive expedition. The American Army, it's small, it's weak, it's undertrained, it's ill-equipped. Guess what? Remember, our entire Air Force, all like 5 planes, was in Mexico, and they all crashed, okay? We don't have anybody with combat experience. So in 1918, these guys are then given to the United States Army, and these will try to train the new American pilots, which, and we'll talk about industry here in a second, but understand, no American built aircraft will see service in the First World War. Okay, the Gilded Age preps our industry to become a world power, but it's not enough for modern industrial war. So we're going to fly French planes, use French tactics, work with French units. So these guys trained in the French manner, this is how our guys learn, how to do their stuff. So again, it's an interesting story, but it gets quickly overshadowed by the American participation because when we come in, okay, understand, most of what we're going to do for the rest of the lecture, besides your essay, which I can tell you're going to have an essay on World War I. I'm a World War I historian. My dissertation was on World War I field artillery. So, I can guarantee that that's going to be on the exam. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But understand, the United States Army was woefully, woefully ill-prepared. Okay, regulars, we have like 20, 30, no, we have probably about 40,000 regulars. That's just not enough. Remember, we're talking Somme, Verdun, Brusilov, 4 million casualties. $1 million, 4 million casualties, okay? We need a lot of guys. World War I, trench warfare is fought by attrition. Okay, you literally have Douglas Haig, who is the commander by 1918 of the British Expeditionary Forces, will say that how the war is going to be this. We have a greater population. At the end of the war, they will have 5 men left, we will have 10 men left, and we will have won. So we need a huge army. To do that, eventually we're going to have 2 million guys in uniform. That means you need 2 million uniforms, 2 million bayonets, 2 million helmets, 2 million rifles. You need all of this stuff. You need lots of artillery pieces, tanks, planes, all this stuff. And American industry is not up to the task. The U.S. Army is so critically short of rifles that, and I actually own one. I should have, brought it. Actually, I own 3, but whatever. That what we had, that, our standard service rifle, the Model 19-3 Springfield, the one I'd mentioned that Theodore Roosevelt had an interest in. We had 800,000. And half of them were actually defective because, when you build a rifle, what you do is you treat the steel so that when the cartridge detonates, the steel contains the explosion. Okay, so the rifle contains it, that's why it shoots out, that's how a gun works. But what would happen for the first about 500,000 of these things is what they would do is instead of, actually testing the temperature, they would just, use a blowtorch until it got red hot and they'd say it's good enough. The problem is on a cloudy day, it changes how the color looks. So, half these things could literally blow up in your face. So we don't have enough of those rifles. So we have to what we have to do is we're making rifles for Great Britain, the pattern 1914 Enfield. We have to chamber that in our standard cartridge, 30 caliber model 19.6, 30-06 if you're a hunter. We have to use those. We have to use British designed rifles because we don't have enough. We don't have enough machine guns, okay? We live in an era today, automatic weapons, yay, Call of Duty. But a U.S. infantry division, 18,000 guys, there would be 50 machine guns to each. We just don't have enough. We have to use French ones, okay? We don't have enough artillery, okay? The stuff we have, our light artillery just isn't good enough. We try to reverse engineer French stuff. No, 100, I think, is the number. 100 American-built artillery pieces actually see service in World War I. That is it. 100. Along with that, by the way, if you're at Stillwater and this actually interests you, again, I'm a nerd. This was my dissertation topic. But in front of the ROTC building, we actually have 2 World War I field artillery pieces on display. A U.S. 4.7-inch gun model 1906, and a British 60-pound gun Mark II. So, that 4.7-inch, when I mentioned that was the type that was the only type of American-built artillery that actually saw service in World War I. Everything else is either not good enough or it takes us so long to build that the first ones come off the production lines the day the armistice is signed. No American-built tank will fight overseas. No American-built plane will fight overseas. I mean, it's just we have to use British helmets, British-made rifles, British-made gas masks. I mean, we will build our own rifles, but they're to a British design. We are woefully unprepared. We're also, and I forgot to put a picture of him, one of the consequences of such industrialized warfare, of so many people coming in, and to meet these quotas, you've got to have mass conscription, is the rise of the conscientious objector. In the sense of people who, say, hey, we don't want to go to war for religious reasons. And the most famous of these guys will be Sergeant Alvin York, who applies to be a conscientious objector. It's denied, and then he goes on to win the Medal of Honor when he kills about 23 Germans and single-handedly captures 128 in the last weeks of the war. I mean, the guy's the ultimate badass, but his story is worth noting because, now with industrial warfare where we're bringing in everything from society, okay, people who otherwise might have not wanted to go to war, or maybe in the past could have, not been drafted, now just get pulled up into the machine. And even with all that pulling up into the machine, okay, what we're going to see is it takes time. It takes a lot of time for the American Army to, get its stuff together. The first guys will land on June 26, 1917. By the way, if you ever want to know how big a nerd your history prof is, there's a reason why June 26th is my anniversary. My wife and I got married on 26th for this reason. That, and she's a huge Doctor Who fan. And okay, just random aside about my wife. If you're a Doctor Who fan, okay, the current season that then aired was the first of the Matt Smith seasons, and the plot story of the first season arc was that the world would end on June 26, 2010, when Amy and Rory got married. Why this is funny is June 26, 2010 was my wife and I's wedding date, but we had picked that about 9 months before that episode ever aired. So without knowing it, we picked what was supposed to be the end of the universe, and, of course, it's marriage, right? I mean, it makes sense to me now, but I'm only saying that because my wife isn't here to murder me. And if she's not here, I don't have to sleep on the couch. Anyways, so June 26, 1917, our first guys of the AEF, the American Expeditionary Forces, land in France. They're commanded by John J. Pershing. Now, Pershing had led the punitive expedition. The expedition had failed, but this guy, right now, 1917, is the only young-ish staff officer with experience leading that many troops. That is how small and inadequate the American Army is. Our guys are ill-equipped, ill-trained. We don't know how to fight trench warfare. So a lot of it, we have to spend time learning. So even though we come in 1917, our first combat will be October the 21st, 1917. It will take until 1918 for our guys to actually, really get in the thick of fighting. But our significance, okay, the significance of the term, why it's so important, is American troops are fresh, okay? They may not be well trained, but there's a lot of them. They're fresh. They're not beaten down from years of war. And because of that, it provides a morale boost that will ensure that the American Army, or, that the Allied powers will eventually end the war. And more importantly, will end the war in 1918, not 1919, not 1920. There were some plans to go into 1923. We ensure the war ends in 1918. Now, one of the fun stories, why I haven't titled this Lafayette We Are Here, is if you remember the Marquis de Lafayette, way back when we were talking about the American Revolution. When he died, okay, he went back to France, but he kept his status as an American citizen. When he died, we sent over ships with American soil. He was buried in American soil. An American flag, as you can see here, I mean, this is actually his grave on, I believe it's June the 26th, 1917. Always flew an American flag. Of such value, okay, did people realize this? Sorry, I'm doing this and I'm thinking, one does not simply walk into Mordor. Anyways, which, by the way, please, if you haven't, go see The Martian. I love Sean Bean making a Lord of the Rings joke and, totally selling it. But the Nazis, after they take over France in World War II, keep an American flag at his grave. This is sovereign American territory. And the first thing American troops do once they land is march to his grave. And one of Pershing's aides, I believe Charles Stanton, says, "Lafayette, we are here. We are here to repay the debt the United States owes you and France." Okay, 1917, 1776, we're still, okay, as a nation, we're still hearkening back to that and trying to draw that in. Now, I wish that, I could keep being yay pro-America with happy stories like that. But one of the unfortunate realities is we have to address the issue of African American troops, because this is still a segregated army. Okay, this is still, white units, black units. Black units would have white officers. Sometimes black ones, but they were led by white guys. John J. Pershing's nickname was Blackjack because he made his career serving with African American troops. But the thing is, people thought they weren't combat ready. They thought these guys were too stupid to fight in combat. Pershing had led black troops up San Juan Hill back in the Spanish-American War. And he would say that African-American troops are not fit to fight the war in Europe. Then that's only hindered by a race riot in Houston, Texas on August the 23rd, 1917. Because what we see is, what happens, a trooper of the 24th Infantry, an all-black regiment, sees a woman being beaten by a cop. So he does what any, human being will do. He goes and he asks, what's going on. The cop beats him. So his buddies beat the cop. Then cops and, soldiers start fighting. And we're going to see that in the court-martials that follow, after 156 riot, there's several deaths. 41 people will be given life sentences, and 19 American soldiers will be executed. Why this is a problem is it just further reinforces, okay, that, this is a segregationist nation, that race relations are at all-time lows, and that the South, this is Texas, the South is uncomfortable with armed African-American troops marching through, southern states. You're going to have cases like the 92nd Division, where the leader, the general officer in command, the general will say, "I'm leading nothing but a division of rapists." The racism is on full display. Or you have the case of the 93rd Division, where never mind the American Army is scrambling to meet, its recruitment quotas, doesn't have enough guys, trying to pull as many guys in as it can, okay? We just give all of them to the French. We just give 18,000 guys. Never mind you've got stuff like this. Join, help Lincoln. Lincoln gave you your freedom, then repay the country now. Okay? The United States Army gives 18,000 guys to the French. And the irony is one of the units, the 369th Harlem Hellfighters, an all-black regiment, would be the most decorated American infantry unit of the First World War. If there was a medal the French had, they got it. These guys were badasses. And I show this painting because now in our, how we live today in a more open society and a more integrated society, we want to retcon that image. We want to bring that image into the American story. So here you see black troops with 1903 Springfields, with American helmets, with American uniforms. But these guys were given to the French. Okay, they would have been equipped with French uniforms, carried French Berthier rifles, have French Édouard pattern helmets. And so while they would, have American uniforms, all of their equipment and weapons were French. But because these guys were so amazing, because we acknowledge that mistake, we as a society want to bring their story into the American story as a whole. But understand, for black troops, it's, quite a different war than what whites will fight. And unfortunately, we'll talk about next time, and there's a documentary that I'm going to post a link to that I want you to watch. What we're going to see is, when you have African Americans moving into the North to get jobs, Then you have African Americans coming back, proudly wearing their uniforms and their medals. That triggers a wave of race riots all throughout the United States. And the worst one in American history will be in 1921, and it will be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So understand, we're setting the seeds for the racial tensions that one day will lead to civil rights. I would love to talk about every battle that we're going to fight. Again, I wrote a 300-page dissertation about it. I'm working on a book about it. But realistically, we just don't have that kind of time. So what I want to do is talk about two main battles that American troops proved decisive in the First World War. The first is what will be the German Operation Michael, also known as Kaiserschlacht, or if you don't speak German, Emperor's Battle. And the idea of Emperor's Battle is the Germans realized that as American troops started arriving in the fall of 1917, in the spring of 1918, they would be decisive. The German army is starting to, the German army can't compete with the Allies. Okay, the Allies are going to build at least a few thousand tanks. The Germans, 18 Sturmpanzer A7Vs, and that's it. 18 tanks to 3,000. They have no new artillery, no new weapons. Okay, their stuff, it's old, it's worn out. Their people are near revolt. If you remember the Donald Duck cartoon that I presume a lot of you watched, which I still need to grade, but, if you remember the, bread that was like a log of wood that, he saws off and eat. The fact is, in the German army, they were having to make sawdust bread where you would literally cut the flour with 50% sawdust just to try to make up volume. I mean, that's, what they're having to do. And the Germans realize they have to take Paris, which if we see the front line here, here's Paris. If they can take Paris, maybe France will go out of the war. Do that so that maybe, there's a chance at any rate that they can win the war before the Americans arrive in bulk. So as they're coming in, our guys just get thrown into the line en masse, and we help to win the battle. You're going to have things like American Marines fighting at Belleau Wood, stopping the Germans there. One of the most famous stories being that, as American Marines of, I believe it was the 5th Marines, moved into the trenches. A French unit broke. And the French officer, Monsieur, the Germans are coming, retreat. And the American officer, retreat, hell, we just got here. And American Marines go into the line and stop the German offensive. We'll have stuff at the Second Battle of the Marne, where the Germans once again are going to be held here at the Marne River. The American 3rd Division will dig in and hold these guys, and they still have the nickname Rock of the Marne to this very day. I mean, that is the 3rd American Division's nickname even to this day. Now, why this is so important is we don't know what we're doing. We take a lot of casualties. There's going to be some inquiries because of the casualties. To charge a German machine gun nest, the American Marine tactic was to go over in 4 lines, knowing that a German machine gun would kill the first 3, but the 4th line could get through and take out the machine gun. Or artillery. Okay, if you're shooting artillery trying to knock somebody out, okay, think of how we do it today. You have satellites and all that crap. Well, you would think, okay, have somebody watching the fall of shot. American officers were trained, just look at a map, figure out where you are, figure out where the target is, do the math, fire, and just hope you hit it. Don't actually check and see if you are. Just assume that you did. We take horrendous casualties. But our guys are fresh, they fight hard, they stay in the line, and they shatter the German army. What this means is the German army, it's still there, it's still a potent fighting force, but its offensive ability is effectively destroyed. They will not be able to launch another offensive for the rest of the war. And so it's in this battle we really see, what is amazing about the U.S. Army and the American Expeditionary Forces. What the significance is, it ensures the war will end in 1918. The Germans can't plot for a spring offensive. With the influx of American troops, Allied superiority in everything will be decisive. And it's out of that we're going to get the deadliest battle in American history. Okay? One of your quiz questions, what's the deadliest battle? And you want to put Antietam. Antietam is the deadliest single-day battle. But the Meuse-Argonne offensive is the deadliest battle in American history. How deadly? In 14 years, since 2001 to now it's 2015, there were approximately 7,000 Americans killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I mean, that's a number that touches all of us. I mean, we all know people who have fought. We all might have known of someone who died. But out of a population of what? 312 million. Okay, 7,000 dead in 14 years. Okay. In the Meuse-Argonne, in 47 days, so a month and a half, 26,277 Americans will be killed in action. Okay, what to translate that? Okay, 7,000, I'm going to do math. Over 3 times what we have lost in Afghanistan and Iraq in a time span of 47 days. Quite literally, it was impossible to not know somebody in the if you were a citizen of the United States at this time, with a population of something like 150 million people. Actually, no, I think it's closer to 130. It would be impossible for you to not know somebody who died in this battle. What we do is the war is ending. Now it's the mad scramble. Beat the Germans down. Just beat them into a pulp. Make them quit the war. And this is, the second American offensive of the war. This is our first really, really big one. And on September the 26th, 1918, American troops go over the top. And it's a broad offensive all along the front. And it blocks up by October. Then we try again, and stops again, and again, and stops again. You have cases like this, the Lost Battalion, the 1st Battalion, 328th Infantry, will get caught behind German lines and surrounded and have to hold out. And so now we've got to fight even harder to relieve these guys. But Allied superiority tells the tale. November 1, 1918, the German army collapses. There's just nothing more they can do, and it turns into a rout. American forces make a breakthrough. And I mean, this whole period, okay, if we go back to August, it's called the 100 Days Offensive, because we see the British attacking up in the north, reverse image, up in the north, then the French down here, and now the United States coming up this way. And the culmination is this leads directly to the armistice. This battle ends the First World War. But the casualties are absolutely staggering. 70,000 French dead and wounded. 117,000 American dead and wounded. Of that, 26,277 between September the 26th and November the 11th. 49% of all Americans dead in the war. Consider this. 1 out of every 2 Americans who die in the First World War die in this battle. That's how bad it is. Roughly, and I'm going to do math, so what is that? 1/4 of, let's see, 1/4 of 1/10 of, let's see, hang on. 1/4 of 1/10 of a percent of the entire United States population died in this battle. 1/4 of 1%, okay, or 1/4 of 1/10. So let's do some. If we were to extrapolate that, okay, 312 million. So 1% of that is let's just say 3 million, okay. So 1/10 of that is 300,000. So now 1/4 of 300,000, okay, let's see. You know what? I'm a historian. The math center in my brain is damaged. So 300,000 divided by 4. Did you know there's a difference between multiply and divide? Because apparently I didn't. 75,000. Okay, that's what we're talking about. If this rate of population loss, we're translating it 75,000 people in 47 days. This is an astronomical number. To put that in perspective, okay, here's the Meuse-Argonne Military Cemetery today. 14,246 American service members are here. That still leaves 12,000 not buried, but each white pixel is a cross. I mean, that's what 14,000 dead look like. Understand, World War I is humanity trying to commit suicide. World War II, yeah, it's worse, absolutely. I'm not disputing that. But with World War II, you have gains, you have people moving, from here to here. But here we're literally talking, a front line that largely did not move but 30 miles either way. And it's a case of World War II. Why are we fighting? Well, if you're, the Germans, you want to take over the whole damn world. The Japanese, you want the whole Pacific. But if you're the United States, we're fighting to, stop the Holocaust. We're fighting to liberate Europe. We have war goals. Nobody has war goals in the First World War. In fact, because of that, to try to give it meaning, Woodrow Wilson, an idealist, creates what he calls the 14 points, done to try to both get people, to agree to end the war, but at the same time, try to ensure this never happened again. Now, this will be part of your essay question. We'll talk about the fate of them, in the next lecture, but I want to at least talk about some of his points. Now, I don't expect you to remember all, but some of the big ones I do expect you to remember. Stuff like freedom of the seas, okay? That, blockades, no, illegal. You cannot blockade somebody else. Or peace without victory. Don't beat the other guy down. Don't, again, you get into a bar fight with somebody. You punch him, and, if you beat the snot out of him, then he's going to want revenge and do the same to you. But if you have a little fight and then go get a beer together, boom, you can move on. He says that if one nation is ground into dust, if Germany's ground into dust, we're going to be doing this all over again soon enough. Stay tuned, he's right. He says no economic barriers. Let's get rid of tariffs. Let's remove where one nation will be richer than somebody else. Let's have arms reduction. Let's scrap all of these battleships, all of this stuff that contributed to a naval arms race. He wants self-determination for the Austro-Hungarians. Let the Czechs, the Poles, the Slavs, the Serbians, the Bosnians, the Herzegovinians, all these people in Austria-Hungary, let them have their own nation. Sounds noble? Remember, he's a racist. We'll come back to that, but that comes with... There's limits, okay? Let's just say that. He says we need, a free Poland. And we need a League of Nations. We need a forum where nations can talk out their differences. Imagine, if you will, the United Nations, but even stupider. I don't know how I don't get fired for this. In my traditional class, I showed the clip from Team America where Hans Blix talking to Kim Jong-il, and we will write you a letter telling you how angry we are. Unfortunately, I didn't stop it before the profanity tirade from Kim Jong-il, but whatever. But it's things like that. It's the League of Nations will not have any power. And why that's so sad is its impotence leads to the Second World War. And again, we'll talk about that coming up. So the Germans have no choice. Okay, they're beaten down. They agree to Wilson's points. The Allies are skeptical, but they more or less say, okay, sure, we'll consider them. So the Germans, the Kaiser, he abdicates. The Germans have no choice but to sign an armistice. And now an armistice simply means you agree to quit fighting. It's not a peace treaty. It's not resolving differences. It's just we're going to stop fighting. Now here's the sad thing. They sign it the evening of November the 10th. It's to go into effect at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. But people keep fighting until the very last minute. You're going to see a number of people lead their troops over the top, wanting to, have the claim of being the last, leading the last assault of the First World War. There's going to be a case, and I never remember the guy's name, but a guy gets a Dear John letter. His wife leaves him, sends him a letter, and he gets it the night before the war ends. So he waits till 10:58 or about 10:57 the next day, jumps out of his trench, runs towards a German machine gun. Well, the Germans know the war's going to end. They, in broken English, German, they're, no, go back. The war's going to end. Go back. And he realizes they're not shooting him, and he gets right up to their trench. So he pulls out a grenade. So the Germans have no choice but to cut him down with machine gun fire. I mean, you're going to have people dying right up to the very second the war ends. And again, it's humanity trying to commit suicide because there's just no reason. They're not fighting to liberate. They're not fighting that. They're fighting because an Austrian got killed by a Serbian, and a huge family squabble triggered an alliance system and led to World War. The casualties are going to be worse in World War II. But for World War I, this was the most devastating war in human history to that time. Over 2 million Germans dead, 1.1 Austro-Hungarians, 750,000 Ottomans, 2 million Russians, 1.4 French, 1.1 British and Commonwealth, 651,000 Italian. But for the United States, only about 116,000 dead and wounded. Our loss was much, much, much worse or less than anybody else. So what that means is this also sets up the Great Depression, which we'll talk about next week, in that while everyone else is beaten down and facing economic hardship and privation, we're at a position where we, have a rapidly expanded industry. We've been feeding Europe. We have all this economic potential, and we have none of the devastation associated with war. Now, here's the part where I wish we could stop right here. I wish we could say, okay, that ends World War I. We'll pick up with Forging the Peace next time. But the fact is, in early 1917, the Russians underwent revolution, and the Tsar was deposed and replaced by the government of Alexander Kerensky. But the Kerensky government wanted to honor its treaties. He said that if Russia dropped out of the war, nobody would trade with Russia post-war. But it was the very war that led to the revolution, and so in October, the Bolsheviks, the communists, seize power. And it triggers a civil war, the Reds v. the Whites being the pro-Tsarist. And in that civil war, once World War I ended on November 11th, the Western Allies sought to intervene and help the, free white Russians fight the Reds in the Russian Civil War. Now, why this is important is we deploy 5,000 American troops to northern Russia. We deploy 7,500 to Siberia. In the case of northern Russia, it would literally be guys on a boat. Hey, the war ends, and the boat just turns, goes north, drops at Arkhangelsk. Now you're fighting Russians. And so it's unpopular, it's badly equipped, it's underfunded. We don't do that much about it. There's going to be some mutinies. And in 1919, the AF Northern Russia will be recalled, and the Siberian troops will leave in 1920. Why I wanted to talk about this very briefly is because this screws up American-Soviet relations badly from the outset. By 1924, the Soviets win the war, and the Soviet Union is established. And it's the Soviet Union that we're going to have to deal with in World War II. It's the Soviet Union. We're going to fight a 46-year-long Cold War from 1945 to 1991. And the seeds of that distrust comes here. But the fact is, politicians responsible for getting us into these messes have some sort of historical amnesia. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan would have a speech, and it would, reaching out to Mikhail Gorbachev, he would say, General Secretary Gorbachev, why do we need this military posturing? Our two peoples have never fought each other. Why can we not coexist in peace? To which Mikhail Gorbachev responded, yes, Mr. President, we have fought each other. You may not remember, but the Soviet people remember. So World War I will not only lead directly to the Second World War, but trigger shockwaves, some of which are not going to be felt until the 1950s and 60s. It's going to lead to World War II, the Great Depression, the Cold War. Realistically, the origins of the modern world in which you live start with the First World War. And on that happy note, let's go ahead and round it up today. I wish we could have done more. I could have bored you guys to death gleefully for another hour, but unfortunately, again, it's that mad scramble to see how far we can get. And I do at least want to make sure we get through the Second World War. As always, take it easy. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to do another video tomorrow or Friday, both about this, and then one about your term papers, which, start looking at sources, pick a topic if you haven't, and start getting on that. And as always, if you have questions or there's something I can do, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to help. Take it easy. Stay safe out there. We'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.